Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode, a special episode of the Nurturing Fathers podcast. As always, my name is Corey Perlman, and I'm here with my friend and father. Just had a recent birthday, just past 50. Congratulations, Mr. Mark Perlman. What's up, buddy?
Doing good. It was a happy birthday. Had a good time within the limitations that everybody is aware of, but had a really good time and feeling good. Happy to
So,
be here.
if as I said, you just turned 50, which would make you have been 8 years old when you had me. So everybody can figure that out. But well, this is an episode that we wanted to do for a little while here. It's been something that a lot of people have asked about. Both my wife and your wife, Dad, have prodded us to do an episode on this, and it's really, tools that dads can use during these very turbulent, unsettling, and challenging times. And so what we thought we would do is just a special episode. We're going to put this out as soon as possible and really just talk about some of the things that Dad, from all the years of experience through the Nurturing Fathers program, can help us during these unprecedented times that even you haven't been through, Dad, but where Nurturing Fathers principles can come into play, and then some of the application that I've been able to use with my own kids. So let's get going, man. So let's just start out, Dad, by just talking about maybe just putting a big picture around kind of where we are for a second here, and some just high level things that dads can think about while we navigate this.
Yeah. Well, what first thing that comes to mind is just the nature of the situation that we're all in. And the pandemic has, as you all know very well, changed just about everything that is quote unquote normal, routine. There is very little that has not been changed by this. That, by definition, that much change is incredibly stressful because change is stressful to us humans. And the more we have of it, the more the stress seems to go up proportionally. Now, I have never been through a situation that has touched so much of normal life and created as much potential stress as this. So I think the overall theme for today is what are some of the strategies that dads and moms can use for themselves to manage stress, and most importantly, make life less stressful for their kids. And it is some survival skills for getting through this, some nurturing skills for getting through this, and they're tried and true. They work in any life situation, but are never more important than they would be in this situation.
Yeah, let's dive into those, Dad, because I'm gonna, we're always real on here, but it has been from a business perspective, from a relationship with Jess, my wife, relationship with my kids. I mean, it has been unlike I've ever experienced before, and I know I'm not alone. And what's crazy about this time is it's not just one country, it's not just one city, state, it's all over the world. We're talking to a fellow father and former podcast guest who lives in Nigeria. And they're going through similar circumstances with this and similar stresses. So, let's go through some of those 6 categories of what we can do to help, manage the stress.
Well, the first most important thing here on some level, and it's a little bit, not totally obvious or maybe a little confusing, is we think how we can help our kids, and that is extremely important. We'll talk a lot about that. But the secret to helping our kids is to help ourselves. When we talk about stress management, the single most important focus to begin with is to deal with our own stress, because the kids will go pretty much the way mom and dad goes. If we're high stressed, and if we're feeling it, if we're emotionally upset, if everything is a crisis, the kids are going to be picking up some of that stress, and it's going to make life more difficult. If somehow we can moderate that and not be so reactive to it. So easier said than done, but here are some concrete tools. These are the tools for self-care and self-nurturing. When we self-nurture ourselves and take care of ourselves, we are meeting stress exactly where it tries to act and react, and we're tamping it down. So when we're filled up with good self-nurturing stuff, we're feeling better about ourselves, we got more energy physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So here are 6 areas that we could focus on. Be real specific. Corey, add some of your tools and I'll add mine. 6 areas where we can nurture ourselves and decrease stress. First one is physical. And the most basic physical thing to come to mind is get enough sleep, as much as you can, and eat well. Very, very basic. Some physical activity, hydrating, drinking enough water, things like that. Just take care of our physical needs. One of the ways to do that is clearly with playing with our kids and interacting with our kids, because they're very physical, like to run around, jump around, climb on dad, tickle dad. And, time with our kids can meet a whole number of these needs, but certainly the physical ones.
Talia said, we were out walking Domino this past week, our dog, and I think I snapped at her or something. She said, "Man, you're grouchy." And I was like, "You're right, I am grouchy." She could see it in my body language. But what was missing over those few days, just due to circumstances here, was my release of stress from a physical standpoint. So the next day I went for a run, and I could tell, she didn't say it, but I could tell that my demeanor had changed. I'd forgotten to take care of myself, so therefore I wasn't taking care of the kids.
Stress manifests in the body. And, so being able to discharge it with a workout, a run, a little, jumping up and down, whatever we do, even a walk around the block. And if you're blessed to have some nature or trees around, you take a walk with the kids around in the trees. Being in nature makes a huge difference. So physical needs are one. The second area are emotional needs, and that's where we sort of act it out, and our kids will act it out. And to take care of our emotional needs, we want to identify them. How are we feeling? And literally put names to them. Am I feeling stressed? Am I feeling anxious? Am I feeling worried? And if possible, talk to someone. If you're in a two-parent family, talk to your spouse or mate about it. It's one of these times where we as men have to be able to feel a little bit vulnerable, which is not always easy for us. But if I'm feeling nervous about an issue or worried that I may not be rehired or get back to work ever, just to verbalize that and get a little bit input. You can problem solve, but right now I'm just talking about getting it out and talking about it. The other thing is just to have some people in your world, whether it's Skype or Zoom or however you do this safely, that you can talk to, whether it's a brother, whether it's a friend, whether it's a grandparent, and also talk realistically about how they're coping with some of this stuff and how you're coping. The social contact means a lot at this point. You don't want to isolate if possible.
So, and just to be clear with everybody, this is a big section of the Nurturing Fathers program. We do this at every program. This is, we spend an entire evening around these 6 categories for men. And we talk about the picture of putting your own oxygen mask on before assisting others, which are airplanes, which a lot of us haven't been on in months. So I don't know if that that description even makes any sense anymore. But yeah, just making sure we take care of our own needs. So physical 1, emotional 2. What's the third one, Dan?
Next is social. Now you can see that there's a thread that runs through a lot of these. Some activities you can cover 1, 2, 3, 4 of these, which are great. Social, again, is keeping in contact with other people. Now, your kids are a source of that. Social time. Your spouse or living friend, mate is a source of that. Once again, we have weekly contacts with certain groups of people. You and your brother, Corey, for sure. But my wife's family, we meet every Sunday night. I have a group of men that meets on Monday night. However you structure that, have that 1, 2, or several people that you can go to just to chat. And just to see how they're doing, just to see how we're doing. You don't have to have that much of an agenda, but just to maintain the social contact, it's important not to isolate. If you isolate, this stress tends to build up like a pressure cooker. Just talking to others tends to diffuse it and release it some. Problem solving is another tool we can use during this, but it's not even just getting quick and easy answers. It's just the process of talking to others.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a big one too. Obviously, hard to do face-to-face these days, but thank God for those tools like Zoom, where we can get some of that interaction and not feel guilty about making that time. That us guys need sometimes with just some guy time and such.
Yes, and that's a real important point. Not to feel guilty about I'm suggesting you take this time for yourself, not just because it's good for you and a nice thing to do, but it is immediately linked to your patience and ability to deal well with the kids. I know myself, when I was stressed out and I wasn't doing this and I was neglecting myself, my fuse was real short. Yep. My attitude was real short, just like Talia called you out on. As I filled these different things up that we're talking about, I was calmer, I was my better self. That's just simply the way it works. So the fourth area after social is creative. Whatever you can do that has a little bit of creativity, breaking the mold, doing something unusual, maybe playing a musical instrument, it may be dancing with your kids, it may be reading a book or a newspaper or something that you haven't read in a long time. It may be reaching out to a friend and just talking to who you haven't seen, somebody who was in college or high school with you. There are many, many ways to do it, but anything creative. I talk to a lot of people who develop new skills, sometimes with their kids and family, sometimes with themselves during this pandemic. You know, I, for one, am playing the guitar more, which I do and don't do, but there is so much more time around. I'm picking it up more and doing more with it. It feels great. Every time I do it, it
But
just feels good
it's
afterwards.
it's similar to working out. I have to just stress to those of us who are creative, muscle isn't as strong as other people's. It can be a pain to start it, right? So that's how I am with the guitar. It's like, I could think of 10 other things to do that are probably more beneficial. I'm not that great at it. It's frustrating sometimes, but gosh, every time I do it, I just feel better, and I feel it just relaxes me. It's fun. I feel like I got a little better. I feel accomplished. So for those of you who struggle working out, it's similar for some of us in terms of the creative aspect, but pushing ourselves to do it tends to make us feel better at the end.
And I like that word accomplished, because on the other side of those things, you feel accomplished. It literally lights you up a bit, you know? So the fifth area, intellectual, the mind, so many ways to do that. Reading, videos, discussing things with folks, whether it's pandemic related or not. There are just so many different ways. And on the virtual world now that we are on at this very moment, there are just many more avenues for that. If you've got an interesting topic that you want to explore, just Google it, put it in there, gather information. The more informed we are about the pandemic and other things, I think the better it is. The one area that I find a little tricky is the political area. And I'll use myself as an example. Too much TV, too much news increases my stress. I've had to literally at times go on news fasts or just tone it down. I watch about a tenth or 10% as much as I used to watch, because the news is just a source of stress for a lot of bad information, and it's presented in a way to kind of hype you up a bit to keep your interest, and it's just too vulnerable a time. So yes, keep informed, but be very careful about dosing yourself with things that are stress producing. And I found that the news is so stress producing. My wife called me out when I'm yelling and talking at the TV set. It's not a good idea.
I've tried to tell you that for years. I don't like your blood pressure. Anytime you're watching that, yeah, stay off that stuff. Just watch your Netflix, Dad. Come on.
Right, right. We're actually watching Sherlock now,
Yeah, you
Sherlock
said
Holmes
that. Yeah.
series. Not that that's totally relaxing. Last is spiritual. Last aspect is spiritual, which I know many of you gravitated toward. That may be church, it may be virtual, it may be synagogue, mosque, it can be reading certain things, can be talking to certain people, it can be being out in nature. If you have walk around trees and stuff like that, you get a feeling of something larger than yourself. The other thing I think of, and there are so many families who don't have enough, so this doesn't apply to everyone, but if you have a little extra of whatever, consider giving it to those who don't. It's just not only a good idea for you and the kids because it's a nice thing to do and it builds character, but in this situation, it really does light you up again and gives you a little bit more boosts and a little bit more energy. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. It could be 2 or 3 cans of food, to go to the food pantry. There are so many needs out there. And when the kids participate in that, it not only takes up some of our time and gives us focus, but it makes us feel like we've done something good and are more connected to others. So, yeah, go ahead, Corey.
No, that's a great. I mean, you nailed it right on the head. I think that I love that you kind of fit that into spiritual, because that serving others, no matter what you believe, is typically right there with what Christianity or Judaism or whatever it might be is right there. So I think serving and giving is perfect to fit under the category of spirituality. And what we'll do, Dad, is in the show notes, we'll put all of these different names of these categories. And then I do want to mention to everybody else too, what we typically talk about in the next layers of this are barriers to each of these areas. So what is getting in the way of us fulfilling needs in each of these categories, and then ways to overcome those barriers. And so I would really highly recommend anybody, especially you guys that you're hearing some of these and saying, yeah, I got this bucket and I'm good with that. I work out every day, but man, I haven't done a creative thing in months, or, you know, or spiritual, whatever. List all these out and be honest with the barriers. What's getting in the way of you doing that? Are we sleeping in? You know, is work getting in the way? Do we just we can't think of anything to do? Is it laziness? Let's be real honest with ourselves and then figure out a way to overcome those barriers. But the goal is to look at this chart of 6 categories and feel like to some degree, each of those buckets are full. And at that point, I think you are officially meeting your own needs, therefore being able to meet the needs of your children and your family.
Yes. So you fill as many of these as possible. The more that are filled, the better you feel. Don't be yourself's worst critic. If you fall off the wagon and don't do this, notice it. That's the most important thing, and do something that's going to correct it and fill one of those buckets up again. But don't use it as an excuse to criticize yourself, come down on yourself. That is actually counterproductive and does the opposite thing. So, and this works when the pandemic's not around, so that we can be our best selves. But at this time where stress is coming at us from every direction,
so Dad, let me ask you real quick, just list those categories one more time. I know people are like, oh, I missed one.
Sure. The 6 categories are physical, emotional, social, creative, intellectual, and spiritual. And as Corey said, they'll be in the notes to the podcast, but I did want to mention those if someone wanted to write them down. The more of those we got going, the better we feel and the more we bring to our kids. Patience is a huge factor. How do you build patience? Not that easy. Not that many people talk about it. This actually is how you build patience, by filling your buckets up a bit.
So that's a great transition. So, you know, we've figured out a way to start to meet our own needs, get us in a state where we feel like we can be a nurturing father. Well, a lot of what Jess and I talk about is, what is this doing to our kids, this pandemic? You know, like, man, what kind of scars is this leaving? You know, that type of thing. So what are some things that we as dads can do for our kids to make sure that they're navigating this as, you know, as manageable as possible?
Yeah, the rest of our time here today will be devoted to that in different ways. The first lens is consistency of your routines. Kids use routines. Well, by routines, I mean, how do we get up in the morning, breakfast, you know, prepare for a virtual school or whatever? How do we go to bed at night? What do? We talk? Do we brush our teeth? Do we say our prayers? Do we talk about our day? See how people are doing? Whatever those routines are in your family, they're more important now than ever, because they give kids a bit of a container where they can feel secure, as opposed to things just being open and bouncing in different directions. The routines are very comforting to kids. So it's really much of what you've already done probably, but at this point, they are more important than ever, and it's the time to keep those routines. Family meals, play, bedtime, family meetings. Do we get around the table a couple times a week and have lunch or dinner together and talk about things that are on our mind? Whatever those things are, this is a good time to keep them in place.
A good point. Yeah, structure, I think, it's hard too, because you can't help but feel like, you know, we've been in 6 months of camp, you know, of just like whatever, you know, shows up and that kind of thing. But as we're in the end of July as we're recording this, and this will probably be out in early August. So school in some form or fashion is starting to happen, whether it be physical or virtual. And one thing that Jess just said to me before I walked downstairs is, you know, we got to start getting our kids back on a sleep, you know, routine that's not summer sleep routine, even though they may be waking up in the same bed and not, you know, getting on a bus or anything like that, but just getting them into that routine and knowing that the switch has been flipped to a school year now, I think is going to be really important for them.
Yeah, it's a great point. And if you can do that a few weeks before, starting it like you guys are thinking, it's much better, because it's just going to add to the stress of the change if we start that morning all of a sudden.
Exactly.
So the more lead time we can give kids to any of these predictable changes, the better it is for them. To have stuff popped on them, it's the same as us adults too, can be stressful. Again, with the kids now, so how are they doing? It's hard to know. It depends on how much they've been told. Depends on, the one thing is that they're going to be doing about as well or not as the parents are doing. So that's why this earlier part of what we're talking about are so important, taking care of ourselves and paying attention to ourselves. Kids are going to have feelings during this time, and the young kids especially don't talk about their feelings. They act their feelings out. They do them bodily and physically, running around, throwing something, saying no. So if we can identify feelings or something being disturbing and not right, it's not 3 or 4 or 5 or 6-year-old are not going to say, I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling nervous. They're going to do something that looks weird. So we want to keep our patience as possible. But I think reassure your kids that we're going to be okay. It's important for them to know that even though things are not normal and are changing, that we as a family are going to be okay. And mom and dad are here. We'll all be together. Those things may seem obvious, but the kids, they're not. And ask them how they feel. Ask them what's going on. How do they feel about returning to school? What do they know about the pandemic? What do they know about how do they feel about friends, whether they're seeing them or not seeing them? There are many, many topics, but ask them how they feel. And then, as a simple technique, you can't fix their feelings. You can comfort them. We're going to be okay. Things will be normal again at some point. Mom and dad will be with you. Our family is together. But it's hard to fix the feelings. But if you just acknowledge them, saying, oh, you're feeling nervous about that. Or, oh, you're a little nervous about going back to school because you haven't been there for so long. And, oh, you miss your friends. Just feeding back what they said and what the feeling is. You're feeling nervous, you're feeling afraid, you're feeling confused. That gives them a sense that you've really heard them and recognized them. That lights them up a little bit. Mom, hey, dad really understands me. And all it is you're really feeding back what you heard and maybe putting a label on the feelings. That kind of conversation is very comforting to the kids, and it's much better than them keeping it inside and this stuff just rattling around in there.
So you're saying that we don't have to fix it.
You don't have to fix it. If there is a suggestion,
shocking as a guy. I mean, that's just
well, okay. The reason I know this is I've heard it so much from my wife about myself. Us guys in a good-natured way are fixers, and when my wife comes to me with a feeling or a concern, I want to fix it in some way. And that is my way of helping. Many times she'll say, "I don't need to be fixed right now. I need to just be heard." People want to be heard and seen, and goes for us adults, but for kids, definitely. If there is a suggestion, about friends, about conflicts or whatever, that's fine, but you don't need to feel the pressure to fix it. Feelings are just feelings.
So as an application, I think this goes with all ages and stages that I've learned over the last few years is side-by-side conversations I tend to get a lot more out of my kids than face-to-face. So an example, that might be a bike ride or walk in the woods, whatever the case may be. But when they don't feel like they're being, talked at, or that I've sat them down to have a conversation or whatever, and we're just talking, and I'm just listening, and doesn't matter what comes out, not trying to fix anything. But boy, the information that tends to come mostly out of Talia, my older one, at 10 years old is really fascinating, gives her an opportunity just to express and let some feelings go. And so that's been really good. So I've learned the side-by-side conversations versus the face-to-face conversations tend to get more out.
That's a great point. And, with men and boys, even more so, when we're shooting baskets together, throwing a ball back and forth, conversation will start, and we just keep that going. And it's somehow easier when it's mediated by some activity.
Yes.
With guys, especially adult men as well as kids. But that's a great point with you and Talia. I have experienced that too, and I have been amazed by what her inner world looks like, how full it is, how thoughtful it is. And I would never have access to that if we didn't spend that kind of time together and give her the space to come out with it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So what about, go ahead.
I was just also thinking of, is there anything else about feelings in kids, Corey, or anything about that emotional part that either you wonder about or have noticed?
Well, I think that it's important, as you mentioned, even early on. So we talk about ages and stages a lot. Lots of people listening have, newborns all the way up to 15 and older. And the importance of labeling feelings, especially in boys, understanding that They can be feeling hurt or sad. I think a big one in the early days is sad versus angry, especially with Milo, my little one. Everything can go to anger, right? He can immediately go to that one. It's a natural feeling for boys. And for us to be able to show ourselves and him that there's a full range of emotions that he has, not just anger, the earlier the better for that. And we think about all the mistakes that we've made as men over our lifetime and as young men. It typically is when the anger bubble explodes, right? And we've put so many emotions into that one little category. But if we learn how to label and understand that we have sadness and jealousy and excitement and all these different other emotions, it's easier for us to feel different emotions as opposed to anger. So I work on that with Milo a lot. He's a red, fiery kid. And I sit him down when he's feeling a little bit better and says, so what happened there? And he can tell me and express, well, Talia did this, which made me feel this. And just getting to that practice has been very helpful.
That's really well said, Corey. That's like an emotional educational process, which kids need. Their emotional, their EQ as well as their IQ. IQ, intellectual. We focus a lot on intellectual understanding and knowledge, but the knowledge of emotions are also very important. What they're called, how they work. And that what you just described is a perfect example of intellect, emotionally.
One other thing to add, just sometimes we think about all the negative in these experiences. It just dawned on me that the pandemic is giving us an opportunity to work on the EQ side of our kids more so than ever before. So maybe our kids will come out with a higher level of EQ, more opportunities to be able to feel and navigate the uncertainty of the world that's going to come from them because of this experience,
Absolutely. And, some dads are out of work and moms, but dads we're focused on now. That gives you more time with your kids, gives you more time to practice some of the things we're talking about. It can be relationship building. There's no question. You may come out closer to your kids and knowing them better as a result of this pandemic.
That's right.
To get whatever we can out of it, that's not just negative and kind of misery making. And I'm not just trying to paint a rosy picture. I'm really focusing on those positive and productive things that not only help us through hour to hour and day by day, but maybe build something lasting. And I see that happening in your family from a distance, Corey. I see your involvement with the kids. I see more creative games that you might be playing and just how things are being handled. And I can see that the kids on their own levels are not only being comforted by that, but I think they're thriving as a result of it too.
Well, and there are two categories I want to bring up, and let's do that one first because you brought up, it's a good transition, which is playing in games and such. I think a hard thing for us has been, technology is always tough in this day and age, but then you add the pandemic and you add them at home 24 hours, 7 days a week. And it has been just a really, really challenging thing for Jess and I to figure out how to detach them from technology. And so, one thing we've tried to do, I said to you in the beginning of this, do as I say, not as I do. So there's been a lot of these things I'm saying that I'm working my butt off trying to figure out myself, and with Jess, but creative ways to get them playing, and I always tell our dads in the classes, Dad, and I want you to elaborate on this as well, is we got to double down on our strengths. And one thing that I know about us as guys and us as dads is we're really good at playing. And sometimes Jess will see me playing this random game with the kids on the living room floor, no idea what we're doing, some random game that we made up. And she's like, how did you do that? I don't know. I'm just playing.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Dads tend to be natural players like this. Again, this comes straight from the Nurturing Fathers program. We talk about it. We do it. We invite them in for a play night. This is the time to sort of bring out that chip, if you will. One of the ways, I'm not an expert in some of the digital world. It was not the same when you and your brother were growing up. You're dealing with things involved in that with the small iPhones and everything else that are way different than what I had to deal with. But when you are engaged in being creative with them, playing with them, being a little wild and crazy, being physical, whether it's tickle fights or races or whatever, they are in that world with you. And the beautiful thing is you can be in that world with them. You talk about a stress reliever. If you enter your children's world, Milo is an incredible kid with fantasy and imagination and stuff like that. When you enter his world, you're not dealing with all this adult garbage that's going on. It's making us stressed and anxious. You are there, and it's beautiful. It brings you together. It's a win-win-win-win for everybody. It brings you together as parent and kid. It gives you access to his inner world. He has dad's time and attention, which is golden. I mean, just letting him take the lead with these little characters, however he does. With Talia, it might be drawing, or actually more of a conversation. She's 10 going on 11, so you can have so. But in terms of play, I think right now this is the best time ever for you to spend some of the time. And not all fathers are off from work. Some are. There tends to be more time, but whatever time you can devote to play with your kids is golden for all those reasons that I just mentioned. Laugh, play, take a bike ride, get outside every day and do a little something, whether it's a walk around the block, whether it's a walk in a park. Obviously, social distancing and safety is high on our priority list, but bike riding is wonderful exercise and enjoyment.
And be present. I think that's one that I remember when every time before I would go into the prison, my friend Des, to teach the fathering program.
Yeah, I'm glad you qualified
that. But before I would go in there, Des would say, take 10 minutes and drop everything else that you have. Because if you go in there distracted or, anything going on in your head, they will notice. This is the highlight of their week, and you owe it to them to be present. And I think the same goes with our kids. So even if we're coming up from the basement, it used to be we'd come home from the office, but now a lot of us are coming home and we're already home, but taking that moment and saying, all right, I know I got stuff going on. The phone's going off the hook. I got meetings, I got this, I got that. Turn it all off. And it's all about the kids. And one other thing to mention too, that I think has been really important as well, as individual time. So it's great to play with all of your kids, whether it be 2, 4, 5, 8, however many kids you have, but finding times to have individual time with each of them is extremely important. So make sure, and I say this to myself too, that we are carving out time just for Milo or just for Talia.
Good point. Good point. So some of the specifics I thought of with this laugh and play, and Corey, you can fill in, and you dads out there can fill in definitely on your side. Jokes. Corey has been doing bad dad jokes for a long time. I think there's a platform you can get on if you put bad dad jokes in there, right, Corey?
Yeah, it's like a hashtag. I think in the beginning, Dad, I was just doing jokes and they were bad, so it ended up being bad dad jokes. But yeah,
maybe dads, that's just natural to dads.
Yeah, you don't even have to put the bad. This is dad jokes, right?
Kids love them, and then they take them to their social circles and they carry them. They always tell me, and I know where they came from. Read stories. Talia's older. She's a great reader. Milo has just become a reader. So letting him read to you or you reading to him. Again, it's not the thing with the digital and the
video
digital and screen time, but the reading is great because he also prepares them for going back to school. But it's fun. There's a lot of different things you can read together to take you to a lot of different places. But having them read to you, also sharpening their reading skills. Play games. This is the time to bring out the board games you may not have used for a while. Maybe buy 1 or 2 new ones. If it's Amazon, you may not have to go into the store. I know, Corey, I saw you playing one that we were playing with the kids when they were down here. This new one that's based on tic-tac-toe but goes way beyond that. I saw how excited they were when they beat their dad, and I remember that from my son who's sitting right next to you there.
There's a recent trick, by the way, that I have to just interject there, Dad, is that, one thing that's drove me nuts, and I recognize you don't do this all the time and there has to be competition, but when it's Talia versus Milo, it always ends up, and obviously you got a winner and a loser and somebody's gonna be upset, but when it's Talia and Milo versus Dad, there never seems to be hard feelings because I always typically lose. And that's not necessarily intentional. Like last night, I lost 5 times in a row and I was trying my hardest.
Tell them what game was that you were playing?
It was this I'm starting to worry about my old age or whatever, but they crushed me in this. It's like a more expert tic-tac-toe version where you can put things on top of other ones, and I didn't fully understand the rules. But the point is that, it just alleviates some of the competition between the two of them. And if you're looking for less battles, them versus you versus them versus each other is better.
Absolutely, great point. That's a great way to do it. It's hard when there's a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old because the 10-year-old's
Yeah.
got such an advantage. That's just a
Yeah.
natural thing in families. But those board games and others like that, but also physical games outside, whether it's shooting basketball or playing with a little ball or, I saw some stuff on the internet, and Corey and I have talked about this. You set up a obstacle course. You can do it in the home, outside, both, but whatever little things where balls roll and things fall and other things pop, whatever games and little things, they like to go from one to the other until they reach the end. But if dad wants to be real creative, you can set up an obstacle course in the home and outside, age appropriate for your kids, that they will get a lot of mileage out of.
And the other thing you can do too is go into their world. I mean, they have more games than we could ever imagine. I know the last time we were at the pool, all I had to do was just be included. I didn't have to create a game or anything because they have 11 games that they all play at the pool. I just need to understand them. Star and Sharks and Minnows and all these other things. The same games, which is funny, Marco Polo that we used to play, I've still, transcends time and comes back and, over and over again. But they got the games. They just want they want you to play. So it's a good reminder.
Yeah, great fun. Outdoor play is wonderful as we can do it, the weather permitting and social distancing permitting. But I think being in the house all day is a stress producer, and the walls begin to close in. So once or twice every day, or however you can do it, to do some kind of outdoor activity, even if it's just a walk around the block, we'll let them use their skateboard or whatever, and you can walk or ride. Music and dance, Corey mentioned that before we got on today. I thought about that and how wonderful that is for dad. The kids get all over it. They love it. Put on some fun music, crazy music, old R&B or whatever we used to dance to, or their music. But to dance with them, it's great physical activity for us. They'll wear us out. But it's a really great source of fun. And then music, they can have some rhythm instruments or even pots and pans to bang and play along. You don't need to spend a lot of money on any of this stuff. It's right there if you want to be creative about it.
And I would say in that regard, from an application standpoint, look for moments. I think like last night, both Jess and I were tired. It was a long day. But all of a sudden a dance party had erupted in Talia's room. And either of us could have easily just been like, and I tried, to be honest, I tried to get out of there. But, when I finally realized that this was a cool moment and, Jess was into it. And so we just let it happen and had an absolute blast. But I know that there was a 60% of my body that wanted just to flee and find my way back downstairs, whatever. So take the moment, regardless if it's past their bedtime or at not a most convenient time for you and just do it, which I think is really important as well.
Yeah, it's truly fun.
Yeah.
And physical. Wears me out, man. I'm surprised at my how little time I can actually spend doing it as I get older.
Yes.
So those are some ideas. Corey, any other, I've seen you be really so creative with your kids. I remember a recent video, you were outside where it's really hot in Georgia where you live. It's really hot in Florida where I live. And you were pouring little buckets of ice water on them, and they were just so crazy with excitement.
Yeah, just another reminder that as dads, like we, in some ways, I want to say we have the short end of the stick. We have the most growth, it seems like, with a lot of the parenting stuff versus the moms. Not that we're competing with each other, but there's a lot of stuff that doesn't come natural to us, but play does. And so it's like just reminding ourselves that like in that moment, where the ice bucket thing was happening, just there was a little inkling in the back of my head that said, well, I want to pour ice on top. And that's what they want, And of course I could talk myself out, you got to put your phone away and you're wearing your nicer clothes and who cares, So just, just going back to those roots of what you really want to do anyway, which is play, I think is great. They absolutely love it. Have fun with them, create boundaries and such, as your kids get older. There's certain things, that you want to just say, hey, Milo likes to hit me in bad spots and stuff like that, and just making sure that you create guidelines and rules, which is important in play as well, is really important. And just having a lot of fun and being in the moment and such.
Yeah. One other short topic, Corey, and then maybe we'll close out but this virtual school thing is just totally unfamiliar to me because I've never had to do it as a parent. Most parents doing it now have never had to do it until now. So it's a little bit daunting, but just from a nurturing father's perspective, not so much the subject matter and stuff, which is way beyond my awareness or expertise. But for those of fathers who are around, this is an opportunity to get closer to your kids' school and education. When they go off in the mornings, you're just not that involved. Occasionally we get to see the teacher and stuff. But here, if they're being educated from home, especially if you're home, there's a chance to get a lot closer and sit with them, especially in their elementary school years. Be curious and ask them what they're doing and how, and if they have questions, help them formulate them for the teachers, but even for the older kids, middle and high school. Show an interest. Let them inform you of what they did at the end of each day. Let them show you a little paper or stuff that you could look over. Your interest will fuel their ability to stay with it and pay attention. And your praise, if you say you've done a great job, I really appreciate you paying such attention to your school when you can't be there in person. That's just going to fuel them and want to make them produce well for it.
It's one of the fundamental principles that I've got from the Nurturing Fathers program that I try so darn hard to remind myself of on a daily basis, which is they will do more of what we pay attention to. And so in light of the fact that many of us will be virtually schooling and making sure that we as dads are taking time to applaud them for their efforts, to look at what they're doing, the projects that they're doing, to just let them show off some of the things that they're accomplishing in their virtual schooling. But the question I often ask myself, Dad, is, and I got this from the Nurturing Fathers program, is am I putting as much energy towards the good things that they're doing as I am towards the bad? And the answer is oftentimes no. That I will get loud and angry and excited when they're not doing something right, but will I get loud and happy and excited when I'm seeing them do something right or well in their virtual schooling? So yeah, they will do more of, they will want to do more of the things that we give them that energy towards. So it's one thing us dads can do very practically.
That's a good point. And set up the expectations clearly right at the outset that you as the dad expect them to spend the time doing their virtual schooling, do the best that they can, and that show me what you've done. I'm real interested to see some of what you've done every day, whether you're home or not home. At the end of the workday, a little time letting the kids show you before dinner what they've accomplished, and then praise them and compliment them for following through. The initial expectation is we want your time, want your attention, we want your best work. And I'm real interested to see what you do because it's important. And then give them a big pat on the back and a nice little bit of praise for a job well done.
And the thing that I would say is the most that I want to give to dads, and I say this, and I would try to give this to myself and moms too, obviously, as we're going into this, is grace. Just knowing that no matter what, this is going to be a tough season. Let's not sugarcoat it. A lot of us are going back to work, and our kids are at home. We don't know what to do. The older they are, the harder it is to give them the same, educational experience that they would have gotten face to face. This is difficult, so just giving ourselves some grace to say that we're going to do the best jobs that we can, and they're going to survive this, and they're going to be okay, and we're going to be okay. And if they don't get the exact reading material or assignment or science project, that they would have in other times, then that's okay. But to give ourselves just some grace that we're going to get through this, and it's okay.
Very good point to end on, buddy. I appreciate it. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It's really nice to spend this time with you. I hope this would be helpful. Corey, thank you for participating, and what an amazing job you're doing during this difficult time with your wife and your kids. Certainly much appreciate that as the grandfather of the whole group.
Well, we appreciate, and I know people who are listening, it takes a village. So anybody that we have around us to support us during these times is critical. And so having both Jess's parents, and family have been great, and then having you and Mimi by our sides, we got a chance to spend some time with you, which was amazing, and give Jess and I a little bit of a break. And the occasional Amazon packages that come with games and fun things for the kids to do are just extremely valuable. And just, bottom line, hearing that we're doing a decent job from you guys still matters, even at 42 years old, hearing that, you're proud of me, which you say all the time, I really appreciate. So thank you, everybody, for being with us on this special episode. Dad, it's always just a pleasure to have a conversation with you about this and to hear your guidance on a situation that you probably never thought that we would ever go through. So
great to share it with you too, Corey, and all the people who get a chance to listen in.
Yeah. Well, thanks, everybody. We'll see you for another episode of the Nurturing Fathers podcast. Please do join us on Facebook at Nurturing Fathers Program. We're also on Instagram. And a big thank you to my wife, Jessica, for all the social media work she's been doing on the Nurturing Fathers to get this out there. So thanks, everybody. Make it a great day.